What are the prospects for the global economy in 2015?
I think the prospects are fairly good. We will see growth accelerating globally, even though most forecasts have revised down their numbers slightly during the last couple of months. It's still broadly believed that growth will be slightly faster than it was in 2014. And we will also get more stimulus. There's been a lot of focus on tapering in the US, but the fact is that the balance sheets of the largest central banks will most likely increase. That's because the ECB in Europe is expected to stimulate more, and also Japan has recently announced it will stimulate more, and perhaps also China will continue to stimulate. So there will be more support from the monetary side.
How will the global stock markets perform?
Well, it's always hard to predict how stock markets will perform, but I think at least it's clear that it will be some support from global macro in terms of faster growth and monetary stimulus that normally is supportive for stock market. But then also, if we learn something from 2014, is that there will also be a large divergence. The markets will not move in sync.
What risks do you see next year?
Well, one obvious risk is the Eurozone. Eurozone is a laggard. The US is growing quite rapidly. Eurozone is clearly lagging, and the developments of the past few months have been disappointing in that respect. Also, some emerging markets are also struggling with growth. So those are obvious risks. But then I think we should be humble in understanding that we cannot foresee perhaps some of the most important risks. Like in 2014, very few people saw Russia-Ukraine crisis coming. Ebola was an unknown risk for most, and the emergence of ISIS in the Middle East was also something that no one talked about 12 months ago.
Why do you think emerging and frontier markets are traded at such a large discount compared with developed markets?
This is interesting. They're trading currently roughly 40% below developed markets, and previously they used to trade at par or at a slight discount, even sometimes at a premium. I think the main reason is that growth has disappointed in 2014, but also in 2013, and there are a number of specific problems in emerging. Russia-Ukraine is one, weak growth in a place like Brazil, protest movements in a number of countries. I think that has caused many investors to be a little bit cautious, but they are at the same time quite excited about frontier markets, and frontier markets have been doing really well during the same period of time. So I don't think it's necessarily about risk appetite, it's more about particular problems in some of the big emerging markets.
In Eastern Europe, East Capital recognizes that Russian and Greek assets are particularly undervalued. Why is that?
Well, for Russia, it's partly because of macro, and it's partly because of geopolitics, and now recently also because of falling oil prices. There are several factors that have exacerbated an already negative view on Russia. In Greece, it's related to politics. There is some uncertainty about the political developments, and there has also been some uncertainty and worries about the banking sector. I think some of those, in terms of Greece, some of those uncertainties are less pronounced today than they were a couple of months ago. But it's generally related to poor sentiment over politics.
What's your view on the Asian markets? Which market are the most promising and why?
Well, what we see in Asia is a little bit similar to Europe. There are a couple of markets that look very attractive from a valuation point of view. In China, in particular, they're trading at fairly interesting multiples, and underlying growth is still strong, albeit slightly lower than it used to be, still quite strong. But there is a skepticism among the investor community towards China. Whereas India and Indonesia are some of the most expensive markets from a valuation point of view. They're growing rapidly and also had very important triggers in 2014 in terms of politics. They had new reform-oriented governments coming into power, and investors are clearly willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that it will actually implement these reforms. That illustrates the importance of politics and reforms.